are there cases that you're still shocked haven't been solved, like JonBenet Ramsey? Do you think that will ever be
No,
solved?
that'll never be solved.
Do you have an idea
No.
who are you going to try and
I go
solve it?
back and forth now. The cases that I work on there's enough people that are looking at that case. I
Why
don't
do you
look at
think they haven't figured it out yet?
because it's so
Like,
messed up.
do you think that
Um,
they screwed it up from the beginning?
Hang on one second. Sorry, my Siri is on for some reason. Somebody must have said, "Hey Siri." um, they, yeah, they definitely did screw it up from the beginning by not taking the family out of the house and
Mm.
that sort of thing. I go back and forth with it. I hate to speculate on these things, but you'll listen to one. There was definitely somebody that had inside information just based on that letter. It's
Mhm.
definitely somebody that had watched the Mel Gibson movie Ransom because there was a lot of language in there that was very similar to the note. Obviously, the note had the $118,000 or whatever it was bonus that he had. So that was weird. Occam's razor, which I'm always a guy of, which is not necessarily the simplest explanation is the best one. It's the explanation that has the least amount of assumptions. So to
Explain
assume
that.
to assume that somebody broke into the house, uh, killed this little girl without anybody knowing, sat there, wrote a letter that had so many details about that only really the family would know, and then left. That's a big assumption versus somebody inside the house perpetrated this crime and then they might have covered it up or did something to cover it up. There's less of an assumption there, less assumptions that you have to make. So, same thing with OJ. They kept on coming up with OJ. It could have been a serial killer, or it could have been this. Or it's like no. There's less of the less assumption is that this is a guy who used to beat her all the time, and even putting all of the physical evidence aside, this is the guy that did it.
Yeah.
So, I think that it still points to people that were sort of inside the house, but there's still a lot of, it's just a tragic case. And it's one of those cases that people will talk about, forever.
Yeah. Is there a case that you're obsessed with now?
I'm working on this case in Philadelphia of this kid who, his name is Everett Beauregard. He was walking around where Drexel is, and he had just come back from a board game night. Um, and he was walking down the street, and a guy walks past him, just walks past him, and then turns around and shoots him in the back of the head, and then shoots him 3 times as he's running away from him, and then is off into the night. And it's so random and so awful. And there's video of it and pretty clear video of it. And I've been working on that one. So that one I would really, and I talked to the family, just talked to the dad last week. That's one that I would really like to solve. There's so little. There was on the 1 year anniversary, there was some graffiti placed right where he was killed, which could be a clue, could be absolutely nothing. The graffiti says JPEG in tagging script. So that's one that I definitely would like to see solved. And these take. I was doing one that was a hit and run, and it was a specific hit. It was a definitely the guy wanted to definitely run over this guy at a gas station in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I started that one in 2016, and they just made the arrest now. So this stuff can take a while, but it's still you just got to stay on it. And what I
Yeah.
tell people is if you want to do this as a citizen, and it helps if you've got journalism background and everything, but I remember going to adopt a dog, and there's a sign up that says, "Are you ready? Are you ready to make this 15-year commitment?" This is a lifetime commitment, and you could never ever tell a family, "I'm too busy." You can never, if you get into this, you're in it, you know.
Right.
And you just got to stick with it, and hopefully something will happen.
You mentioned the word meaningless. How often are crimes found to be random? I mean, I know when you're watching 48 Hours or even the ID Network, which I used to love, they would always say it's usually someone that you've known or there's some sort of connection, but there are some that are completely meaningless and random. Is there a statistic on that?
There probably is somewhere, but there's so many unsolved that you don't know.
Mm,
But remember, a lot of these crimes are happening on the street. Yeah, if it's a definitely if it's a woman, it's usually somebody that she knows. Absolutely.
right.
But men are the majority of homicide victims. So it might be somebody that they were in business with. It might be a rival. It might be over drugs. It might be over anything. Yeah. So it depends. But yeah, like that's the thing. It's just like we've sort of trained true crime fans into watching these shows, and the shows that they're watching, I would say probably 90% of true crime shows have a female in it somewhere. It's either a female victim or a
Mm,
female perpetrator, or it's a guy killing a man over a female.
right.
You know, most murders, that isn't it. That's not what happens. Most murders, it's male on male crime. That's it. There's no female involved or anything like that. They just don't make shows about that. So when
Right.
everybody's talking about, true crime is not crime. True crime is its own sort of thing that's out there that's very separate, and it's not representative of what real crime is in America.
Right. It's more pop culture
Yeah.
crime a little
Yeah.
bit. You mentioned Making a Murderer before, which by the way, I loved that series or whatever you call it. What do you think what was his name? Stephen Avery? Do you think that he is ever going to get out of prison? Do you think he's innocent?
Again, Occam's razor. It's definitely, they tried to. I didn't like that show just for a sense of that they left things out. They had eight
Oh.
episodes or 10 episodes, and they didn't
Hmm.
include the DNA that was found, the sweat DNA that was found on the hood latch. It's like, and then they said we didn't have enough time. And so I was like, no, you had enough time. You could have put that in there. Even if you were going to say that it was planted, you could have put that in there.
Hmm.
That sort of stuff. They had an agenda to say that this guy was guilty or innocent. The Occam's razor is that he did it. Obviously, he had answered the door in a towel. She didn't like this guy. She had actually complained about him. The car was found there. Whether he was, it's a good story that he was framed because he was owed the money from the police department. It was, I would say 90% that he did it, and maybe 10% somebody else in that enclave, wherever they were did it. Yeah. So
Right. But not planted by the police who didn't want to pay the
I
bill.
think they probably, they framed a guilty man. I think they planted some of that evidence, definitely. Yeah. Not I
Got it.
shouldn't say definitely, but yeah.
But
I mean,
not for
finding the
no
key.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, that used to happen all the time. That's one of the reasons why we had a 90%, in 1960, we had a 90% clearance rate of murders in America. Now it's down to like 55.
Wow.
So 45% of murders in America are not going to be solved this year. When I started, it was like 64, so it's going down and down and down.
Hmm.
And a lot of that is that they used to beat the hell out of people to get confessions in 1960, but you also had less murders. You didn't have everybody knew everybody. People trusted the cops. They would inform on other people, as good citizens should do. And,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. But now it's totally different. People don't talk to each other. They're not neighbors. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of guns, and that kind of thing.